bookish besties. My name is Brittany. This is Rescues and Breeds. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you are new, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're already subscribed, as always, I appreciate your continued support. Thank you for returning to another video. Today it is time to do my April TBR, and in full transparency, I had already filmed this video. I filmed this video last weekend. It was supposed to be edited and uploaded by today, the day that I'm filming, which is Sunday, March 30th. And unfortunately, when I went to upload the footage in the middle of the week, I realized that I somehow pressed the button on my camera for slow motion. So that entire TBR video was filmed in slow motion, which naturally I cannot use. So here I am refilming the video, but of course that means that this is going to go up slightly late. Instead of Sunday the 30th, it will hopefully go up on Wednesday, April 2nd. And I say hopefully because my content in April is going to be a little bit wonky. I am actually heading out to California tomorrow because my mother is having hip surgery, and I'm going to be out there for roughly about a week in order to kind of help her a little bit with anything that she might need while she's recovering. So all this to say, there's going to be some videos that are going up late, and there are also going to be gaps in my content because all next weekend I'm not going to be able to film, and while I'm out in California I'm really not going to be able to edit either. So I'm not going to be able to do basically anything booktube related while I'm out in California. So there are definitely going to be late videos going up, and there are going to be gaps in my content when I'm not able to film and when I'm not able to edit. And that also kind of means that I don't necessarily know what my reading is going to look like in April as well. I do hope that at the very least I'm going to be able to read a couple of books while I'm out there in California. I don't expect to be busy all of the time. I expect it to be very much like real life here, just over there, you know, and helping my mom. So I am still really hoping to get some good reading done, but I just don't know. So we are going to kind of have to play April by ear. Anyway, now that all the disclaimers are out of the way, we can go ahead and work on building April's TBR. But before we can get into that, we have to quickly wrap up how I did with March's TBR. We're going to go ahead and start with the challenge pool. So challenge pool number 1, I needed to read a book that I'd consider a comfort read. For that, I selected First Time Caller by B.K. Borison, which I did read. Challenge pool number 2 was to read one of the books featured on NPR's Books We Love list, and for that I selected The Briar Club by Kate Quinn. But unfortunately, I don't think that I've decided to continue with that book. I'm really kind of exiting my historical fiction era, and I'm really only picking up very, very select historical fictions these days. And I did start The Briar Club, and it really just was not working for me. It was not what I wanted to read. So I went ahead and set that down. I didn't end up completing this prompt in March, but Bride by Ali Hazelwood is featured on their list from 2024. And I have to read that to complete the Reading the Best Books of 2024 according to BookTube project that I'm currently in the process of. So when I end up reading Bride, I will have completed this prompt, so no worries there. And then challenge pool number 3, the prompt was essentially something to the effect of you have to read a book that has a connection to another book in a different genre. So there are kind of 2 similar prompts. And for this, I ended up selecting Winter by Marissa Meyer, and I did read that. Moving on into gameplay, the very first prompt that I had to satisfy was to read a book with yellow on the cover. For that, I either gave myself the option of The Briar Club or Destroy the Day by Bridget Kemmerer, and I did end up reading Destroy the Day, so no worries there. Then I had to read a book box selection, and for that I chose Penitence by Kristen Koval, which I did read. Next, I had to pull from the Challenge Cup because the move got me into my safety zone, and the Challenge Cup pull was to read an anticipated read, and for that I selected Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister, which I did read. Next, I had to read a book that gave me summer vibes, and for that I also decided to read First Time Caller by B.K. Borison, which again I did read. Then I had to read a book with green on the cover, and for that I selected Freak by Jennifer Hillier, and I did read that. All right, so now let's go ahead and start building my TBR for April. Now, of course, because I've already filmed this video, I have already done all of the challenge pulls and everything like that. So I'm just gonna have to kind of tell you what pulls I drew and what books I selected for them, because I'm not going to try to like recreate that. And I've already gotten rid of all the slips of paper and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna tell you what I pulled and the books that I will be using to satisfy them. So first, let's go ahead and talk about what me and my patrons are going to be reading for our monthly book club. For the month of April, we have selected This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. This is one of my anticipated releases for 2025. I'm very excited to be diving back into another Ashley Winstead, although she has kind of been a little bit hit or miss for me. I absolutely loved In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, didn't really vibe with The Last Housewife, and I was actually quite entertained by Midnight is the Darkest Hour, although I thought it was a little bit weird and unusual, and none of it really stuck with me. So I'm really hoping that This Book Will Bury Me will be my next favorite Ashley Winstead. This says, after the unexpected death of her father, college student Jane Sharp longs for a distraction from her grief. She becomes obsessed with true crime, befriending armchair detectives who teach her how to hunt killers from afar. In this morbid internet underground, Jane finds friendship, purpose, and even glory. So when news of the shocking deaths of 3 college girls in Delphine, Idaho takes the world by storm and sleuths everywhere race to solve the crimes, Jane and her friends are determined to beat them. But the case turns out to be stranger than anyone expected. Details don't add up. The police are cagey, and there seems to be more media hype and internet theorizing than actual evidence. When Jane and her sleuths take a step closer, they find that every answer only begs more questions and begin to suspect their killer may be smarter and more prolific than they've faced before. Placing themselves in the center of the story starts to feel more and more like walking into a trap. Told 1 year after the the astounding events that concluded the case and left the world reeling. When Jane has finally decided to break her silence about what really happened, she tells the true story of the Delphine massacres, and what she has to confess will shock even the most seasoned true crime fans. One of the reasons why I think that this is going to be a new favorite is because it really focuses all about true crime, right? I'm a big fan of true crime. I watch it consistently, and so I really love books that feature true crime as well. So I am incredibly excited for this book. I am very much looking forward to it. The next mandatory read that I have for the month of April is The Wedding People by Alison Esbach. This was sent to me in my March Book of the Month box, and as y'all know, I try to read these as they come into me. But this is also going to be May's book club selection for the Bookworm Bitches book club. If I have the opportunity to read these books ahead of time, I definitely do try to do so. And since this was already on my immediate radar to read, I definitely want to go ahead and get it out of the way. This says, it's a beautiful day in Newport, Rhode Island when Phoebe Stone arrives at the Grand Cornwall Inn wearing a green dress and gold heels, not a bag in sight, alone. She's immediately mistaken by everyone in the lobby for one of the wedding people, but she's actually the only guest at the Cornwall who isn't there for the big event. Phoebe is there because she's dreamed of coming for years. She hoped to shuck oysters and take sunset sails with her husband, only now she's here without him at rock bottom and determined to have one last decadent splurge on herself. Meanwhile, the bride has accounted for every detail and every possible disaster the weekend might yield for, except for, well, Phoebe and Phoebe's plan, which makes it that much more surprising when the two women can't stop confiding in each other. In turns absurdly funny and devastatingly tender, Alison Esbach's The Wedding People is ultimately an incredibly nuanced and resonant look at the winding paths we can take to places we never imagined and the chance encounters it sometimes takes to reroute us. So sorry for any angle change. I just realized that my memory card was running out of room, so I had to go ahead and clear some things off of it really quick. But I do believe I was still talking about The Wedding People by Alison Esbach. This is obviously a book that has been going around the bookish internet, right? It was a Lolly finalist on Book of the Month. I've been hearing a lot of amazing things about it. There's something about this that makes me nervous. I think it might just because I know that this is going to be like somewhat of an emotional read, and so I feel like I'm gonna have to be in the right headspace for it. I am looking forward to it, but at the same time, I am really nervous about it. But I do want to go ahead and read it because I physically own it. It's going to be a book club selection, so I've got to get to this one. Now, the next mandatory read is my patron pick. Every single one of my patrons at the Domino tier and above is allowed to give me a book that they want me to read, and every single month I select from the books that they've chosen for me. And the selection I made for this month was The Maid's Diary by Laura Ann White. This was Andrea's selection for me, and she selected it for me because it's a thriller that she thinks that I am going to enjoy. I had never heard of this book prior to her recommendation, and it actually has a 4.22 average rating on Goodreads, which I think is really solid for a thriller, and so I have high hopes. This says, Kit Darling is a maid with a snooping problem. She's the invisible girl, compelled to poke into her wealthy clients' closely guarded lives. It's a harmless hobby until Kit sees something she can't unsee in the home of her brand new clients, a secret so dark it could destroy the privileged couple expecting their first child. This makes Kit dangerous to the couple. In turn, it makes the couple, who might kill to keep their secret, dangerous to Kit. When homicide cop Mallory Van Alst is called to a scene at a luxury waterfront home known as the Glass House, she's confronted with evidence of a violent attack so bloody it's improbable the victim is alive. There's no body. The homeowners are gone and their maid's missing. The only witness is the elderly woman next door who woke to the screams in the night. The neighbor was also the last person to see Kit Darling alive. As Mal begins to uncover the secret that has sent the lives of everyone involved on a devious and inescapable collision course, she realizes that nothing is quite as it seems and no one can escape their past. I absolutely love the sound of that. That certainly sounds like something that's going to be right up my alley, so count me in. I am looking forward to this one for sure. And then also in my Patreon, instead of doing series read-alongs, we do author read-alongs. So every single quarter we vote on a new author that we want to read from, and then we select from their published works the books that we want to read together. And our very first author read-along was Grady Hendrix, and the very final book that we will be reading of Grady Hendrix is his newest release called Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. I admit that I'm a little bit nervous about this one because even though I have really enjoyed Grady Hendrix in the past, I'm a little bit nervous just because I do know that this is very historical in nature. I think it's set in like the 1970s and it features like pregnant teens being sent off to a nunnery and stuff like that. But from my understanding, they are introduced to a book of witchcraft, and this kind of lets them get back their agency, right? They're very frustrated at the fact that they have no control over their lives at this moment, and so learning the witchcraft is going to somehow give them back their choice and their agency. If I'm understanding that correctly, I'm absolutely going to give this a try, right? I really enjoy Grady Hendrix. I'm just a little bit nervous about this one simply because, as I mentioned, I am moving a little bit away from historical fiction and I kind of have to be in the right mood for historical fiction, but I'm very excited to get to this one. And then next quarter, we are moving on into John Mars. And so I'm very excited about the books that we're going to be reading for that as well. So those are the 4 mandatory reads that I have to get to in the month of April. Now let's go ahead and move on into the challenge pulls. All right, so the first challenge pull that I drew was simply to read an anticipated release. I've mentioned this before, but as I did make that video all about my 2025 anticipated releases, I do want to make sure that those are a priority this year. And so in order to ensure that I am making them a priority, I have added those to my challenge cup. And so the slip simply says anticipated release, and I can choose whatever I want to use to satisfy this. Now, as I mentioned, this book will very Bury Me is definitely an anticipated release, as is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. Both of those books were featured in that video, and so I'm going to be using one of these to satisfy that challenge cup pull. The next challenge pull was to read a book that involves digging up the past. Now, this is one that I have not yet selected anything for because I have a feeling that a lot of the books that I read in some form or fashion involves digging up the past. And so I'm going to kind of hope that throughout the natural course of my reading in April, I'm going to uncover something that involves digging up the past. So for now, I think I'm going to go ahead and kind of keep this one open. If I do think of a book that I might want to read for this while I'm editing the video, I will let you know, but otherwise I will come back and let you know what I selected for this when we are doing May's TBR. And then the very final challenge pull was to read a book set in a manor, mansion, or estate. And I did ask my patron Andrea, as she was the one that gave me The Maid's Diary, if the setting of that book could be considered a manor, mansion, or estate, and she said that yes, in her opinion it could be. So I'm going to be using The Maid's Diary to satisfy this challenge pull. All right, friends, we are now finally getting into the gameplay, so let's go ahead and start with draw number 1. All right, everyone, it is time once again to play the My Bad TBR game. As per usual, we are going to stick with the standard 6 draws, although I'm not entirely sure what my reading is going to look like in April. I am still hoping that I will be able to fit in at least 6 books for the month. So we're going to go ahead and stick with the standard 6 draws and hope that the board is kind to us. So let's go ahead and start with draw number 1. All right, so as we know, an ace is either a move forward 1 or get a color out of start. Now, I can't move a yellow out of start because there is a yellow out there on the free space, and this red guy is actually also supposed to be there on the free space. So the only colors this would actually benefit are blue and green. Otherwise, the other pawns have to move forward 1. So let's see what color we have to move. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and flip the board really quick. We will move one of the blue pawns from start. Okay, going out there. And so that's a pretty great start to the game because not only do we now have an extra blue pawn on the playing field, but that is a free space, meaning we don't actually have to add a book to our TBR yet. All right, my very first draw was the color blue and an ace. Now an ace means I can either move forward 1 or, if applicable, I can get a pawn from start out onto the playing field. And in this instance, because I drew a blue and I had blue in start, I was able to move one of my blue pawns out onto the playing field, and that spot directly in front of start is a free space. So no book will be selected for that. Okay, draw number 2. Okay, blue again. Well, luckily both of the blues are right here. And what I actually think I'm gonna do, y'all, is go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and get that guy safely into his home base so that now nothing can touch him. And once again, that is another move in which I do not have to pick a book. Next, I spun another color blue. This time I drew a 5, and that worked out perfectly because I had a blue guy within his safety zone, and it took exactly 5 spaces for me to get him into his home base. Now, when a pawn moves into their home base, that means they are permanently safe. They are no longer considered active, and so I can't move them any longer. And so I opted to move that blue guy into home base, and once again, no book will be chosen. All right, draw number 3. Okay, we got a jack. That is a non-movement card, so I think we're going to actually have to increase the draws this round just to get some books on my TBR because first 3, we've got nothing. All right, then next I drew a jack, and as y'all know, a jack is a card that allows me to double up. So if I have 2 prompts that can be satisfied by 1 book, I'm allowed to use a jack to do so during gameplay. And so those are just kind of cards that I hang on to until I need them. For the moment, we are not going to be using that jack. We are just going to be setting him aside. Okay, draw number 4. All right, well, I knew that the board could not be kind to us for long, so a joker means one of my pawns has to go back into start, and I have to take kind of a punishment prompt, if you will. So let's go ahead and see what pawn is moving back into the start, and then we will go ahead and get into what punishment prompt I'm taking. All right, well, that little yellow guy over there didn't make it too terribly far. So he's going to go right back into his start, and we'll see what kind of prompt I now have to satisfy for the joker. And then I drew a joker. Now, anytime I draw a joker, the punishment is automatically to have one of my pawns go back to their start. In this instance, I spun a yellow, so one of my yellow pawns went back into start. But then also, I do have to read a book connected to a punishment prompt of sorts. Now, in the past, I've just kind of had your standard punishment prompts, like read an intimidating book or a book over 500 pages or a book that's lowest rated on your TBR or something to that effect. But actually in my Patreon, I have a whole thread dedicated to TBR game prompts, and my patrons are allowed to give me any kind of prompt that they want me to satisfy. Now, a lot of them I would consider punishments in some way because they are definitely books that would take me outside of my comfort zone, right? But not all of them are very punishment-y. Like, for example, the one that I drew for this round was actually just to read a bookish book. And so I'll take that, right? Yes, my yellow pawn had to go back into start, but the prompt that I selected is actually very easy to satisfy because another anticipated release that I needed to get to very soon was We Are Watching by Allison Galen. I've mentioned this before, but The Collective by Allison Galen is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. And so I was very excited when she announced a new release. And so this has actually come in as a hold for my library and it is ready for me now. So I'm ready to go. So this follows our main character, Meg, and at the very start of the story, she and her husband are taking their daughter to college. But something kind of unusual and scary happens, and then she ultimately ends up losing control of the car, and this kills her husband. So now the book is starting 3 or 4 months later. They are trying to move on, but unfortunately they start to be targeted by this really like fanatical cult-like group, because essentially what happened is that when Meg was only 15 years old, she actually published a fantasy novel, and people feel like her book called The Prophecy is actually a prophecy of the end of days, which is ridiculous, right? But essentially these are dangerous people who actually believe these things, and they are targeting Meg, her daughter, and also Meg's father. And I'm really interested to see how all of this comes about. It sounds a little bit weird for my taste. I normally can't necessarily get behind the whole cult thing in books just because I can't suspend my disbelief for it. You know what I mean? Even though I know that in real life people fall for the cult nonsense all the time, my logical, rational mind cannot let myself believe that it happened. So some of the things that happen in books because of people in cults is just like way over my head. I'm just like, absolutely not. It's one of the reasons why I couldn't connect with The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead, because I'm like, you really expect me to believe that these girls were so enamored with this one guy that they did all of these horrible things? I'm like, absolutely not, right? But I'm definitely excited to give Allison Galen another shot. All right, draw number 5. Okay, so 4 is a backwards movement, and the only pawn that is in prime condition to move backwards 4 is that red, because that would put him in a good location to get into his safety zone. Otherwise, everything is just moving further away from their home base. So let's see what color we get. Okay, yellow again. Well, I actually only have one active yellow pawn on the playing field. He is right here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, blue on the cover. All right, next I drew a 4 and spun the color yellow, and this landed me on the prompt to read a book with blue on the cover. Now for this, I actually have 2 options that I'm going to allow myself. The first is The Last Love Note by Emma Gray. I picked this up because I really enjoyed Pictures of You by Emma Gray, but the problem is that I just don't know if I'm in the mood for this kind of story. I recently read some contemporary / romances that were pretty heavy. I recently read The Last Letter by Rebecca Yarros. I recently read Saving 6 and Redeeming 6 by Chloe Walsh. And if you've read those books, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because not only are those incredibly long, my friends, but they are incredibly harrowing books to read. And I know that this one also features grief, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be as heavy as the other books that I've read, but I don't know if I want to jump into this one immediately, especially because I'm also going to have to be reading The Wedding People. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this one a priority like I was originally expecting to. So just in case I never find myself in the mood to read that one, another book of the month book that I of course also want to make a priority is Count My Lies by Sophie Stava. Now this is another one that I'm really not too entirely sure about. I mentioned this when I originally picked this up from book of the month, but I do not love me an unreliable narrator. I just don't, and that's entirely what she is. She's like a pathological liar, and you can't really trust anything that she says. And I've been hearing pretty much terrible things about this. I think I only know one person that really enjoyed this book. So I am going into this very tentatively. At the best, I'm really just hoping not to actively hate the book. That's not really how you want to go into a book, right? But I definitely have to get this read, so it's going to go on the list. All right, so far we have done 5 draws, and I only have 2 books that are going to have to go on my TBR. So I may go ahead and increase the draws. We will see what draw number 6 gets me. Okay, friends, so we are actually now in an identical situation to the one that we were in with blue, because I have this green guy right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, home base, and there's like a little hair. Okay, so that is once again a movement that does not require me to pick a book. So we will go ahead and draw at least one more card for draw number 7. All right, then I drew a 5 and spun the color green, and that led me to an identical situation that I had with the blue earlier in the game, and this allowed me to get one of my green pawn into home base. So that is what I opted to do, and again, no book is going to be selected. Another jack. Okay, well, that is definitely going to come in handy at some point in the future, having these two jacks, but yet again, another book is not being added to my TBR. So let's go ahead and go for draw number 8. And then oddly enough, my next draw was a jack. That is exactly the same thing. After I drew the 5 and spun the blue and got the blue into home base, I got a jack. And then after getting the green into home base, I also drew a jack. So that's a little bit weird, but hey, it is what it is. I now have 2 jacks that I'm going to be saving for a rainy day. I don't think that I'm going to be using them for this round of gameplay. So those are going to be set aside. And again, no books are chosen. Okay, so we got a 3 and a blue. Ideally, I would move this guy 1, 2, 3 into the safety zone, and I think I might, but I also kind of want to move this guy away from start so that this last blue would have an opportunity to come out. So if I did this 1, 2, 3, that would land me on random number generator, and if I got him into the home base, then that would be a challenge pull. I think I have to be smart, and I have to do that because otherwise this guy is at risk. So I will go ahead and do a challenge pull for that guy. All right, and then the very final draw that I decided to do got me the number 3, and I spun the color blue, and that actually allowed me to get a blue pawn into the safety zone. The safety zone squares do not have prompts attached, but I draw from the challenge cup, and this time when I drew from the challenge cup, it gave me yet another anticipated release option. And of course, as we already know, I'm reading several anticipated releases this month, so that is going to work perfectly. So I can use Witchcraft for Wayward Girls for this one, We Are Watching for this one, or This Book Will Bury Me for this one, or who knows, maybe I will even get to another anticipated release, but either way, that is going to be satisfied. All right, everyone, that is it. Those are all the books that I'm going to be attempting to read in April. As always, please comment down below and let me know what you think of some of the books that I have on my TBR, or let me know some of the books that you are going to be reading in the month of April. If you've made it to the end of this video and you are not feeling chatty, please go ahead and feel free to leave me a wave emoji in honor of The Wedding People by Allison Espach. And as always, if you like this video or if you just like me, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I typically post 2 videos a week, one on Wednesdays, one on Sundays, and I would love to connect with you in any of those future videos. But if you'd prefer to connect with me outside of BookTube, you can always find links to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Patreon linked down below, along with any books featured in the video. Until next time, y'all, bye.